Here's Johnny!
In many ways, there's no film quite like The Shining. A movie about a family who moves into a hotel where a strange supernatural force entices the father into violence, and his son, receiving both past and future visions, has no doubt influenced generations of filmmakers and remains one of the best horror films ever made. This review will contain spoilers, and I implore anyone who has yet to see this movie to please watch it and come back to this review. I was lucky enough to see The Shining for the first time in theaters during a re-release in the fall of 2016. It was completely packed, which immediately speaks volumes to how beloved the film is. I still have my ticket. With The Shining, there are literally hundreds of videos analyzing this movie, even an entire movie dedicated to providing hidden messages and theories. Instead, this is just my thoughts and review of the film. I do have some of my own thoughts I've come up with over the years, and this is my chance to get them out and celebrate a masterpiece that's now 40 years old. So let's take a look at Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Right off the bat, this movie captivates me with its gloomy, hypnotic, synthesized score. The aerial shots used throughout the opening sequence are truly gorgeous. We're introduced to Jack Torrance, who is summoned to a job interview. The use of the Steadicam for the shot of Jack walking into Mr. Ullman's office is a sign of greatness to come with that device. Jack Nicholson is unquestionably one of the greatest actors of all time. The man simply becomes the characters he portrays and likes to add his own manic abilities to them. And his performance here is nothing short of amazing. What I love the most about this opening is how much we learn about Jack in just a few minutes. He's a writer trying to come up with new material and was a former school teacher. But most importantly, we get the sense that there's something very off about him. Stephen King, author of the book, has been famously quoted as saying he dislikes not only the movie, but he dislikes the way Kubrick portrayed Jack as a crazy person from the beginning. And while I can understand his criticism that Jack was supposed to be a nice family man, I think it works in the film's favor because how can he have 5 months of peace and quiet with a 6-year-old son? It just doesn't make any sense. Like the best horror movies, you feel the tension of a family entering an environment they're not accustomed to, and that the hotel is far away from any sort of civilization. It feels almost out of this world. This is aided by the hypnotic synthesizer, and again, it just works so well to captivate this weird feeling. Next, we get introduced to Dick Hallorann, played by Scatman Crothers, in a performance that should have received an Oscar nomination. He is absolutely wonderful in this movie. The moment where he uses his shining ability to communicate with Danny is one of those theatrical moments I will never forget. The close-ups, aided by the audible sound drowning out and the music, just made it absolutely chilling. The conversation he has with Danny is one of my favorite conversations ever put to film. While Hallorann explains the history of the hotel in a way Danny can understand it, it's more about what he doesn't explain that makes it so eerie. He doesn't tell him exactly what the Overlook represents, nor what's in room 237. At the same time, we get to hear more about Danny's imaginary friend Tony, why he was unconscious at the beginning, and how this sort of sixth sense can see into the future and the past. He explains it enough so the audience has a general understanding of what The Shining is, but will have many more questions as the film progresses. Danny rides his tricycle around the Overlook with some of the best camera work and sound design I've ever both heard and seen. I'll just take a minute to say both the exterior hotel they use for the aerial shots and the Overlook set built in England are absolutely gorgeous. And while the layout of the Overlook notoriously makes no sense, it just consumes you with what is yet to be revealed. We see the loving relationship between Wendy and Danny blossom, but Jack continues to be very dismissive. His desire to be alone for months to write in peace is halted by the fact that he barely spends any time writing. As time passes and Danny continues venturing down those hallways, the music becomes extremely creepy, especially when stepping in front of room 237, the room Hallorann told him never to enter. And speaking of creepy music, the scene where Danny is alone in the room with his father is a prime example of true terror. While it's only dialogue being exchanged where Jack states how much he loves his son and that he's willing to do anything to protect him, the undertones in Nicholson's performance, accompanied by the music crescendoing at the end, sells us on the fact that not all is what it seems. Child abuse is a subject that looms over The Shining just as much as Jack's alcoholism, and the two come to a head when he goes and sits at the bar and is greeted by the bartender Lloyd. But not before Jack says this crucial line.
My goddamn soul. Just a glass of beer.
Selling his soul, perhaps? While we saw the ball rolling in the twins earlier, that was the hotel coming alive for Danny. This is the first time we see the hotel come alive visually for Jack. After After Wendy tells him some strange lady strangled Danny at room 237, he goes there. And in a scene filled with so much nudity, I'll try and censor it as best I can, the scene is intercut with Danny and Hallorann shining each other about what's going on. And I gotta give it to Scatman Crothers again in this scene because he is outstanding. The man looks like he's literally going into shock. And all of this has that creepy, droning heartbeat score infused into it. Something I want to draw on is the use of mirrors throughout this movie. I love Kubrick's attention to detail since Jack is facing one when he kisses the woman. When he was talking to Lloyd earlier, he was also looking into a mirror. And they also play a huge part during the conversation with Grady. But before that, Jack and Wendy converse about the mental state of Danny. When Wendy suggests they leave, Jack loses it. And again, holy shit, Jack Nicholson's angry performance is just top-tier acting. This man absolutely hates his family. And that fourth wall break, I see what you did there, Kubrick. It's Jack looking into Danny's room, that look of pure hatred and disgust. Almost like he's blaming his family for his failings as both a man and a writer. The hotel really comes alive after this, and Jack makes his way into the gold room, which is filled with a bunch of people having a good time. He bumps into Grady, but before that, pay very close attention to the woman beside him. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. He and Grady go into the bathroom, and Grady reveals himself to be Delbert Grady, not Charles Grady. I can't think of anyone I know that's reviewed this movie that's mentioned this before. When Ullman is talking about the 1970 massacre that happened at the Overlook, he specifically said the caretaker's name was Charles Grady.
My predecessor in this job hired a man named Charles Grady as the winter caretaker.
I guess Jack only remembered the last name. Anyways, the acting portrayed by Phillip Stone here is honestly some of the best acting I've ever seen in a film. He completely transforms into this demon-like figure who tells Jack in a racially insensitive way who's coming to the hotel, how Danny has these supernatural abilities, and what he needs to do to his family that are trying to leave the hotel. As Danny is going further and further down the rabbit hole with his little imaginary friend Tony, Wendy has to make a decision to take him and leave the Overlook. She goes to basically confront her husband, but discovers just what he's been writing, and Jesus. I will say this is one of the best scares that I was never spoiled on. I never saw a parody or a mashup of this scene, and seeing this in the theater with that surround sound was just absolutely terrifying. Jack appears, and of course Nicholson's performance is incredible, but it's here that I'd like to discuss Shelley Duvall. Her acting was heavily scrutinized, including Stephen King, who claimed she was there to scream and be stupid. She was even nominated for a Razzie that year, and I can't help but disagree strongly. I think she's great throughout the entire movie, and I sympathize with her character because it's clear she loves her husband, despite what a complete asshole he is, but she's genuinely afraid of him. However, this is the scene where she takes charge. It would be one thing if her character requires the help of somebody else like Hallorann to get her out of the situation, but she holds her own. She did what she had to do in order to survive, which is what the best and strongest heroines do in film. And also, I don't know about any of you guys, but if I was in this situation and my partner was axing down a goddamn door to kill me, I witnessed a man in a bear suit giving oral sex, another man with a sliced head, skeletons, and a river of blood flowing from an elevator, I'd be petrified. So I think her reactions are very genuine. Now the next scene in this film is quite possibly the most important. Jack is locked in the pantry and converses with the voice of Grady. After he gives him his word that he'll correct Wendy and Danny, the door is opened and Jack is freed. This is the moment that completely changes the movie. Up until this point, pretty much everything can be summed up through child abuse and hallucinations due to long-term isolation. But nope. The supernatural presence is real here. Danny warns his mother that danger is coming, and that's in the form of Jack axing down the door. I absolutely love the way Kubrick directed all the axe scenes. The camera is seen tracking the movement of the axe instead of the person, which is very unsettling. It's like we're feeling the impact of that axe, and it all leads to one of the best lines of all time.
Here's Johnny!
We always talk about that line, but I've always wondered why Jack says that in the moment. I know the actor Jack Nicholson improvised the line, but I like to think that's what he said to Wendy whenever he'd come home drunk. Hallorann, who literally left his hotel, got on a plane, rented a snowcat to come all the way to the hotel, dies so tragically. It's such a sad moment. He drove all the way there just to get axed by Jack. The chase through the maze is amazing, with Danny outsmarting his father by covering up his tracks. He's able to escape with Wendy on the snowcat, leaving Jack to freeze and die. Now here's the thing. The movie could have ended with this shot right here. and it could have been explained as hallucinations through isolation, and a man who was driven insane went to his inevitable death. But it doesn't. The camera slowly moves through the room to a picture hung of the Overlook in 1921, and Jack is in the picture. I like to believe Jack Torrance is a reincarnated version of the man in this photograph. This can explain why he tells Wendy earlier,
"It was as though I'd been here before. It was almost as though I knew what was going to be around every corner."
The Shining is one of my favorite films of all time, and I do think it's one of the best movies ever made. Not just one of the best horror films, best films. And I think the beauty of this movie is it can be interpreted in so many different ways, and every way you can interpret it makes the movie fascinating in its own way. The struggle of alcoholism, the deterioration of a family, the mental instability with isolation, a man struggling with a midlife crisis and longing for youth. All of these also factor into the line Hallorann says to Danny.
"You know, Doc, when something happens, it can leave a trace of itself behind."
Violence has plagued that hotel, seeing how it was built over an Indian burial ground. And Jack becoming seduced by the soul of an evil place awakened the spirits of the hotel. But again, this movie can be read in many different ways, and you could simply describe it as hallucinations. The fact that nothing was real and Danny was the one that let him out of the pantry is a theory I saw once explained. But I think it's astonishing how 40 years later, this film is still being analyzed, as there's no real concrete way to explain the whole thing. Thank you all so much for watching. I have wanted to review The Shining since I saw it in theaters, and now I finally get the chance to on its 40th anniversary and on Halloween Day. I appreciate all the love and support. Please click that like button, subscribe for more, and until then, stay tuned.